Guy de Maupassant, The Colonel's Views. By God, said Colonel Laporte, I am old, gout-ridden, my legs are stiff as wooden planks, but if a lovely lady, were to order me to thread the eye of a needle, I believe I'd leap through it like a circus performer through a hoop. That is how I will die. It's in my blood. I am an old gallant, a battle-hardened soldier of courtesy. The face of a woman, a dear woman, stirs me from head to toe. Do you understand? However, gentlemen, we are all essentially like that in France. We remain knights, no matter what, knights of love and fortune, especially now that we've done away with the good Lord, whom we once served as bodyguards. But a woman, you see, cannot be ripped from our hearts. She is here, right here, and here she will stay. We adore her, we will adore her, and we will never cease to commit every manner of folly for her sake, for as long as France remains on the map of Europe. And even if France were to meet her end, the French would never change. Under the gaze of a woman, a charming woman, I feel capable of anything. Damn it, when I feel her eyes upon me, that devilish look that sends fire running through my veins, I want I know not what. I want to brawl, to fight, to smash the furniture, to prove that I am the strongest, the bravest, the most daring, the most devoted of all men. And I am no exception, no, by hell I am not. I swear to you, the entire French army is like this. All of us, from the lowliest private to the general. We press forward and are ready for anything when a woman, a beautiful woman, is concerned. Remember what Joan of Arc once compelled us to do. And, I'll wager that had a woman, a pretty woman, taken command of the army on the eve of Sedan, after Marshal MacMahon was wounded, we would have broken through the Prussian lines and, strike me dead, drunk to her health by firing their own cannons. What Paris needed was not a Trochu, but a Saint Genevieve. This reminds me of a story from the war, which proves quite convincingly that in the presence of a woman, we are capable of the impossible. I was a captain then, a simple captain, leading a scouting party retreating through countryside already occupied by the Prussians. We were surrounded, pursued, exhausted, worn down to savagery, and collapsing from fatigue and hunger. We had to reach Bar-le-Duc by morning, or we would be shot down, cut to pieces, our throats slit. How we managed to avoid it thus far, I still don't know. We had 12 leagues to cover that night, 12 leagues through snow, in a snowstorm, and on an empty stomach. I thought to myself, this is the end. My poor wretches will never make it. We hadn't eaten for a full day. We had spent it hidden in a barn, huddled together for warmth, unable to speak or move, sleeping the fitful, broken sleep of men pushed to the absolute limit. By 5 o'clock, it grew dark. A snowy, murky night descended. I set about rousing the men. Many refused to get up, unable to move or stand, numbed by the cold and all their other hardships. Before us stretched a plain, a vast, cursed, bare plain, and the snow kept falling. The white flakes fell and fell like a curtain, shrouding everything in a heavy, dense, frozen pall, a chilling mattress of frozen down. It seemed as if the world was ending. Let's go, lads. They looked at the white powder pouring from the sky and seemed to think, enough. We can die right here. So I drew my revolver. The first man to fall behind, I'll shoot him like a dog. And so they set off, but they trudged forward as if dragging shackles. It was plain their strength had left them. I sent 4 men ahead as scouts, about 300 meters forward. The rest straggled along as best they could, bunched together, some with long strides, others with short steps, depending on their exhaustion and the length of their legs. I placed the sturdiest men at the rear, ordering them to encourage the stragglers with a bayonet in the back. The snow seemed intent on burying us alive. It dusted our kepis and greatcoats without melting, turning us into phantoms, the shades of soldiers dying from mortal fatigue. I kept telling myself, we will not get out of this unless a miracle occurs. From time to time, we would stop for a few minutes to wait for those lagging behind. Then, the only sound was the soft rustle of the snow, the faint, barely perceptible whisper of countless falling flakes. Some of the soldiers brushed themselves off. Others stood motionless. Then I gave the order to move out again. The men shouldered their rifles and trudged onward, swaying with exhaustion. Suddenly, the scouts returned. Something had alarmed them. Voices could be heard ahead. I dispatched 6 men under the command of a sergeant and stood waiting. Then, a piercing female shriek cut through the oppressive snowy silence. And a few minutes later, 2 prisoners were brought to me, an old man and a young girl. I questioned them in a low voice. They were fleeing from the Prussians, who had seized their house that evening and gotten drunk. The old man feared for his daughter, and without even alerting their servants, the 2 had fled into the night. I immediately grasped that they were burghers, and well-to-do ones at that. "Come with us," I told them. We set off once more. The old man knew the area and showed us the way. The snowfall ceased, stars glittered in the sky, and the cold became bitter. The girl walked with her arm in her father's, her gait uneven and stumbling, her whole figure expressing despair. From time to time, she whispered, "My feet are completely frozen." And I confess, my heart ached most of all for her. It was unbearable to watch the poor thing plowing through the snow. Suddenly, she stopped dead. "Father," she said, "I am so exhausted. I cannot take another step." The old man tried to carry her, but he could not even lift his own daughter, and with a heavy sigh, she collapsed into the snow. The men gathered around them. I paced on the spot, not knowing what to do, unwilling, truth be told, to abandon the old man and the young woman to their fate. Suddenly, one of my soldiers, a Parisian nicknamed Pratique, declared, "Well, brothers, let's carry the young lady, or else, damn it all, what kind of Frenchmen are we?" I think I swore in admiration. "Damn fine idea, lads. And I'll help carry her, too." To the left, in the darkness, the vague outline of a small wood was just visible. Several men went over and soon returned with a bundle of branches woven into a makeshift stretcher. "Who'll donate their greatcoat?" shouted Pratique. "For a pretty girl, brothers." A good 10 greatcoats fell at his feet. In a moment, the girl was wrapped in the thick cloth, laid upon the stretcher, and 6 soldiers hoisted it onto their shoulders. I took my place on the right, at the head, and on my honor, I was thrilled to have a share in carrying her. We now marched with far more vigor and cheer, as if we had taken a draught of wine. Jokes even began to fly. You see, the mere presence of a woman is enough to electrify Frenchmen. The soldiers almost reformed their ranks, grew animated, warmed up. An older veteran voltigeur, marching beside the stretcher to relieve the first tired comrade, grumbled to his neighbor, but loud enough for me to hear. I may be no spring chicken, but strike me dead, the moment I lay eyes on a woman, the blood starts racing in my veins. We marched almost without a halt until 3 in the morning. Then the scouts returned once more, and immediately the entire unit dropped into the snow, becoming a barely visible line. I gave my orders in a whisper and heard the dry, metallic clatter of rifles being loaded behind my back. For down there in the valley, Something unimaginable was happening. It was as if some colossal beast were rushing about, now stretching out like a snake, now coiling into a ball, lunging sharply to the right, to the left, stopping, and then starting to move again. Suddenly, the mysterious, wandering shadow drew nearer, and I made out a chain of a dozen lost Ulan galloping at full tilt, searching for their way. They were so close that I could clearly distinguish the snorting of their horses, the clatter of arms, and the creaking of saddles. I commanded, "Fire!" A volley of 50 rifle shots tore through the nocturnal silence. Another 5 or 6 followed, and then one last solitary shot. When the gun smoke cleared, we saw that all 12 men and 9 horses were down. 3 horses were galloping away wildly. One of them, crazed with terror, dashed about, dragging the corpse of its rider, whose foot was caught in the stirrup. A soldier near me laughed a grim, chilling laugh. Another said, "Think of all the widows that'll make." Perhaps he was a married man himself. A third added, "Didn't take long to manage that." A little head peeked out from under the greatcoats. "What has happened?" she asked. "Was that a battle?" I replied, "It's nothing of consequence, mademoiselle. We have just dispatched a dozen Prussians to the next world." She murmured, "Poor souls," and, as she was cold, she disappeared back beneath the greatcoats. We moved on. We marched for a long time. At last, the sky began to pale. The light spread, sparkled, and gleamed, and a pink band settled along the eastern horizon. A call rang out in the distance. "Halt! Who goes there?" The detachment froze, and I stepped forward to parley. We had reached the French lines. As my men filed past the outpost, the commanding officer, seated on his horse, to whom I had just reported all that had transpired, noticed the stretcher being carried by and called out in a loud voice, "And what, pray tell, is it you have there?" At once, a blonde head, disheveled and smiling, popped out, and a clear, young voice rang forth. "It is I, sir." My soldiers burst into unanimous laughter, and a feeling of joy warmed every heart. Pratique, marching beside the stretcher, began waving his kepi and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Long live France!" I don't know why, but I was suddenly moved. It all seemed so charming and noble to me. It felt as though we had saved the entire fatherland, accomplished something beyond others' power, something simple yet truly patriotic. And that little face, I shall never forget it. And if anyone were to ask my advice about abolishing drums and bugles, I would propose replacing them in every regiment with a pretty girl. It would be far better than playing the Marseillaise. Damn it, how it would hearten the men if, next to the colonel, they could see such a Madonna, a living Madonna. He fell silent for a few seconds and, shaking his head, added with unshakable conviction, "Yes, say what you will, but we Frenchmen, we cherish our women."